I bought a VTech DM221 baby monitor for one specific reason. It doesn't have Wi-Fi, no cameras, no internet, no way for a stranger to hack into my daughter's room. I thought I was being the protective, rational father. I live a normal life in Pennsylvania. I do IT support. My wife teaches 3rd grade. But on a Tuesday afternoon, while my 14-month-old daughter Margot was napping, the static changed. It didn't glitch. It formed a perfect clinical sentence in a voice that wasn't human, but wasn't robotic either. It said, "She is going to need the word for ceiling before you think to teach it to her." I checked the room. Margot was asleep. The monitor was analog. There was no one on the frequency. It was just an impossible instruction delivered with conversational ease. I didn't tell my wife, not because I was scared she'd think I was crazy, because I'm an IT guy. I'm good at rationalizing the unexplained. But then it happened again and again. Every nap, one sentence, precise, instructional, and terrifyingly accurate. It told me Margot was dreaming in colors she didn't have words for yet. It told me not to interrupt her when she studied a cabinet hinge for 4 minutes. I started keeping a log in a marble notebook, documenting a curriculum I didn't authorize. My daughter began hitting milestones months ahead of schedule. She wasn't just growing, she was being built. And the worst part wasn't the voice itself. It was the realization that Margot wasn't just listening to me. She was listening to it. By the time I finally showed the notebook to my wife, it was too late. The voice knew I'd told her. It told me the information was moving now. I turned the monitor off and hid it in a closet, thinking I could end the lesson. But the next morning, my 22-month-old daughter looked at us and said in a syntactically perfect sentence, "It's okay, I can do both." She wasn't just speaking English anymore. She was speaking a language with a cadence I only recognized from the static. Now, we are parenting a child who knows things we never taught her, and we're terrified to compare our notes. Stay until the end, because you need to ask yourself, if something was making your child exceptional, would you stop it? Even if you didn't know what it was turning her into. If you find yourself drawn to these types of curiosity-driven mysteries and long-form horror, consider subscribing to the channel. We dive deep into the cases that logic can't explain. Now let's go back to where it all began. I think the only way to make any of this make sense is to go back to the beginning. Not to the first time I heard the voice. Before that, before Margot, before the monitor, back to the version of my life where none of this existed. Because if you don't understand what that life looked like, you won't understand why I made any of the decisions I made once it started falling apart. My name is Joel. I'm 34. I do remote IT support for a logistics company based out of Wilmington, Delaware. I've been with them 6 years. The job is not exciting. People call me because their VPN won't connect, or their Outlook is syncing to the wrong calendar, or they accidentally deleted a shared drive folder and need it recovered before their manager notices. I fix things. That is my entire professional identity. Someone tells me what's broken, I figure out why, I fix it, I move on. I have never once in my career encountered a problem that could not be explained by a misconfiguration, a user error, or a hardware failure. Everything has a cause. Everything has a log. You pull the log, you find the cause, You fix the thing. That's it. I say this because I need you to understand the kind of mind that was sitting in that kitchen when the static changed. I am not a person who hears things. I am not a person who entertains the unexplained. I am a person who, when the printer doesn't work, checks whether it's plugged in before he checks anything else. I am boring in exactly the way that makes you good at IT support and bad at parties. Suzanne is the opposite of boring. She teaches 3rd grade at a public elementary school about 20 minutes from our house. And she is the kind of teacher that kids remember into adulthood. She's warm. She's organized in that way, where the organization isn't the point, but the warmth is, and the organization just makes the warmth land more efficiently. She keeps a laminated schedule on the refrigerator and color codes it by family member. She meal preps on Sundays. She texts me pictures of her students' art projects. She is the most real person I have ever met, by which I mean she is entirely, continuously, visibly present in her own life. Nothing about Suzanne is hypothetical. We bought the house in Langhorne in 2021. It's a 3-bedroom split level, nothing remarkable. Light blue siding, attached 1-car garage, a backyard that's big enough for a grill, and a small garden bed Suzanne planted with tomatoes that first summer. The neighborhood is the kind of neighborhood where people wave from their driveways but don't come inside uninvited. There's a Wawa 11 minutes east. Suzanne's mother lives about 40 minutes north in Doylestown. It is an ordinary house in an ordinary place. And when I tell you that, I need you to hold on to it, because the ordinariness of this house is not backdrop. It is the thing that made everything else so hard to metabolize. Nothing about our house, our street, our zip code suggested that anything could happen here that could not be Googled and explained in under 5 minutes. Margot was born in August of 2023. She was 6 pounds, 14 ounces. She had a full head of dark hair, and she screamed for about 9 seconds and then stopped and just looked around. And the nurse said, "Well, she's alert." And Suzanne laughed, and I cried. And that was the beginning of parenthood, which is the beginning of a specific kind of fear that I don't think you can explain to people who haven't experienced it. It's not anxiety exactly. It's not dread. It's the sudden, permanent awareness that you are now responsible for a person who cannot protect themselves, cannot communicate what they need with any precision, and will, for the foreseeable future, be entirely dependent on your ability to interpret them correctly. You become a translator for a person who doesn't speak your language yet, and you know that every mistake you make in the translation has consequences you might not see for years. The first year was what the first year is: sleep deprivation, the staggering logistics of bottles and diapers and pediatrician appointments, the incremental revelation that your marriage is a different machine now, one with more moving parts and less margin for error. Suzanne went back to teaching in October. I was already working from home, so I became the primary daytime parent by default. This was not a sacrifice. I want to be clear about that. I liked it. I liked the rhythm of it. Margot would nap in the late morning and the early afternoon, and I would work during the naps. And during her awake time, I would put the laptop away and be with her. It was a clean system. It worked. The monitor was purchased in June of 2024, when we moved Margot from our bedroom to her own room. She was 10 months old. We'd been using a clip-on monitor that came with the bassinet, and it was fine for the same room. But once she was across the hall and behind a closed door, we needed something with actual range. I did the research myself. This is what I do. When a device needs to be selected, I research it. I read specifications. I compare. And what I found immediately was that the market for baby monitors has split into two categories. There are the smart monitors, which are Wi-Fi connected, camera-enabled, app-integrated, cloud-synced devices that let you watch your child on your phone from anywhere in the world. And there are the analog monitors, which are radio frequency transmitters that send audio from the nursery to a parent unit within a fixed range. No internet, no cameras, no data transmission beyond the direct RF signal. I chose analog. I chose it because I know what Wi-Fi connected devices are. I work in IT. I know that anything connected to a network is a potential access point. I've read the articles. Strangers accessing baby monitor cameras. People talking to children through hacked speakers. I was not going to put an internet-connected microphone and camera in my daughter's room. That was the threat I understood. That was the threat I could prevent by making the right purchasing decision. A VTech DM221, audio only, 2-channel frequency hopping to prevent eavesdropping, $40 device, no app, no account, no cloud. Just a transmitter on the shelf in Margot's room and a parent unit on my kitchen counter, and the sound of her breathing coming through the speaker when she slept. I set it up on a Thursday evening, tested the range from every room in the house, clean signal throughout. The transmitter sat on the shelf above Margot's changing table, green LED glowing steadily, picking up the white noise machine and the ambient sounds of the room. The parent unit sat in the kitchen where I could hear it while I worked. It produced a low, continuous hiss when the room was quiet, punctuated by the soft sounds of Margot shifting in her crib, the occasional sigh, the noise machine cycling through its rainfall loop. For 4 months, the monitor did exactly what it was supposed to do. I heard Margot sleep. I heard her wake up. I heard her cry when she needed me and babble when she didn't. The green volume bars on the parent unit pulsed with the intensity of the sound, and I learned to read them without thinking. 1 bar meant quiet. 2 bars meant she was stirring. 3 bars meant she was awake and talking to herself. 4 or 5 meant she was crying and I needed to go up. Those were the last 4 months of normal. I didn't know that at the time. You never know the normal months are the last normal months while you're in them. You just live in them. You drink coffee at the counter and you listen to your daughter breathe and you think, this is just what life sounds like now. October 1st, 2024, Tuesday. I know it was a Tuesday because Suzanne has a standing staff meeting every Tuesday after school and doesn't get home until about 5. And I had made a note to start dinner earlier because I was making something that took longer. Margot went down for her afternoon nap at 12:30. She was 14 months old. She was pulling herself up on furniture. She had about 8 words. Mama, Dada, more, up, no, dog ball, and a sound she made that we interpreted as water, but was really more like wawa. She was a normal 14-month-old. Normal weight, normal height, normal everything. Her last pediatrician visit had been routine and unremarkable. By 12:50, she was fully asleep. I could tell by the monitor. The hiss had settled into its deepest quiet, interrupted only by the noise machine's steady wash. I was at the counter chopping a bell pepper. I had a cutting board and a knife and a podcast playing at low volume on my phone. Something about database migration that I was half listening to for work. The afternoon sun was coming through the window over the sink. It was an ordinary moment. I want you to see it. I want you to feel how ordinary it was, because what happened next did not arrive with any warning. There was no crescendo, no shift in the static, no flickering light or cold spot, or any of the things that happen in movies to signal that the rules are about to change. The voice came through the monitor at exactly the volume a person standing near the transmitter would register. 3 bars on the display. Conversational, measured, and it said, "She is going to need the word for ceiling before you think to teach it to her." I put the knife down. I put it down carefully, the way you put a knife down when your hands suddenly feel unreliable. I looked at the parent unit on the counter. The green bars had settled back to 1. The hiss was normal. Margot's breathing was audible, slow and steady, asleep. The voice was not male and not female. I know that sounds like I'm being evasive, but I'm being precise. It did not sound androgynous, which is a word for a voice that blends male and female qualities. It sounded like neither. It sounded like a voice produced by something that had no gender to blend. It had no accent. It had no affect, no warmth, no coldness. It was not robotic. It was not synthesized. It had the quality of a person speaking in a room to someone they could see, delivering information they expected to be received. It was, in the purest sense, a speaking voice. It just didn't belong to a person. I picked up the parent unit. I held it to my ear. Nothing. The hiss of the room. Margot's breathing. I put it down. I stood there for about 15 seconds, which is a very long time to stand still in a kitchen, holding nothing. Then I went upstairs. Margot's door was closed. I opened it slowly. The room was exactly as I had left it. Blackout curtains drawn. Noise machine on the dresser. Blue LED pulsing softly. Transmitter on the shelf above the changing table. Green light steady. Margot on her back in the crib. One arm up over her head, the way she always sleeps. Her chest rising and falling. Her mouth slightly open. No one else in the room. No open window. No device I hadn't placed there. Nothing. I closed the door. I went back downstairs. I finished chopping the bell pepper. I put it in the pan. I made dinner. Suzanne came home at 5:10. We ate. We gave Margot a bath. We put her to bed. We watched television. I did not say anything. I need to explain why. It was not fear. It was not denial, exactly. It was something more mechanical than that. My brain did what my brain is trained to do. It filed the event in the category of the things that probably have a boring explanation I haven't found yet. Interference from a nearby baby monitor on the same frequency, some artifact of the ERF transmission that happened to sound like words. A momentary auditory hallucination brought on by fatigue or the particular white noise frequency of the room. I did not investigate these possibilities. I did not need to. The point was not to find the explanation. The point was to know that an explanation existed somewhere in theory, and to let that knowledge be sufficient to continue my evening without disruption. I am very good at this. I think most people are good at this. It is the skill that keeps ordinary life running. 4 days later, Saturday, Margot's afternoon nap. Suzanne was home, in the living room grading papers with the television on low. I was in the kitchen. Same counter, same monitor, same hiss. The voice said, "She already knows what the dark sounds like. That is not what she is afraid of." Same volume, same bars on the display, same voice. Not male, not female, not anything. A sentence delivered to a room, through a speaker, at conversational volume, and then silence. I looked toward the living room. Suzanne had not reacted. She was 30 feet away, with ambient noise between us, but the monitor was not quiet. 3 bars. If she'd been listening, she might have heard something. She wasn't listening. She was grading papers. I picked up the handset. Hiss, breathing, nothing else. I put it down and I opened the kitchen junk drawer and I got out a marble composition notebook, the kind with the black and white cover that you can buy at CVS for $2, and I wrote down both sentences. The first one from Tuesday, the second one from just now. Date, an approximate time for each. That was all. No interpretation, no commentary, just the words, exactly as I had heard them, in my handwriting, in a notebook. I want to tell you what it was like to keep that notebook over the next several weeks, because I think from the outside, people imagine a state of constant terror. Gripping the counter, staring at the monitor, jumping at every sound. It wasn't like that. It was the opposite. The voice came once per nap, only during naps, only one sentence. Then it was gone, and the rest of the day was completely, aggressively normal. Margot woke up happy. She ate her snacks. She played. She did all the things a 14, 15, 16-month-old does. The monitor sat on the counter and transmitted nothing but the ordinary sounds of a sleeping child. And then, once, during the nap, the voice would say its sentence, and I would write it down, and the nap would end, and the day would continue. It was like receiving one email per day from an account you don't recognize. You read it, you note it. The rest of your inbox is normal. The sentences were always about Margot. Specifically, they were about her cognition, what she was processing, what she was ready for, what I should and shouldn't do in response to behaviors I hadn't yet observed. Here's what the notebook looked like by the end of October, October 8th. The word she is practicing in her sleep right now is more, but she means it differently than you use it. October 11th. Her left ear processes your voice faster than her right. Sing to that side. October 14th. You are going to notice her studying the hinge on the kitchen cabinet. Do not interrupt it. That sequence takes about 4 minutes. October 19th. When she cries at 3 in the morning tonight, it will be because she dreamed in a color she does not have a word for yet. Comfort will work. An explanation would be better, but you do not have the language either. October the 22nd. She is ready for the concept of yesterday, but you will not believe this for 5 more months. October the 26th. The way she is arranging the blocks is not random. She is testing whether you will correct her. Do not correct her. Every one of these was accurate, not approximately, not in a cold reading horoscope kind of way, where you can massage any observation to fit a vague prediction. Specifically, verifiably accurate. October the 15th. The morning after the hinge entry, Margot crawled to the kitchen cabinet, pulled herself up on the handle, and began opening and closing the door, slowly, watching the hinge. She did this for 3 minutes and 40-something seconds. I stood there with my coffee, and I did not touch her. And when she was done, she looked up at me and said, "Open." And the word sounded different than it had all the previous times she'd used it. It sounded like she understood the mechanics now, and the word had caught up to the understanding. October the 19th. She woke crying at 3:10 a.m. I held her. She calmed quickly. Suzanne stirred, but didn't fully wake. I did not explain. October the 26th. The blocks. She arranged them in a configuration that was not a tower and not a line and not any structure I would have called correct. I watched my own hand begin to reach out and rearrange them, and I stopped because the voice had told me not to correct her, and I pulled my hand back and she looked at me. The look she gave me was not a baby's look. It was the look of a small person who had just received confirmation that the adult in the room was going to let her work. I don't know how else to say it. By November, I had a routine. Margot naps. I sit in the kitchen. The voice delivers one sentence. I write it down. I observe whether the prediction or instruction manifests. It does. I write that down too. It was a system. I had built a system around an impossibility, and the system was functioning, and the functioning felt like control, and the control felt like I was handling this, and I was not handling this. I was being trained, because that's what was happening, and I see it now. Each accurate prediction made me trust the next instruction. Each instruction I followed produced a visible positive result in my daughter. Each result made me more willing to follow the next instruction. I was being conditioned through my own competence as a parent. Every good outcome was a reward. Every reward made me more compliant. The voice had found the one lever in me that actually worked, which was not fear, not curiosity, not ego. It was the desire to be a good father. I used the only thing I would not question. Margot's language development began to accelerate. Dr. Soren, her pediatrician, noted it at the November wellness check. She said Margot's receptive vocabulary was well above the 90th percentile. Her expressive language was remarkable for her age. She said, whatever we were doing, we should keep doing it. I sat in the exam room with my daughter on my lap, and I wanted to say something. I wanted to say, I am not doing this. Something else is doing this, and I am just following its instructions. And I said nothing. I said thank you. I took Margot to the car. November the 14th. The voice said, she will say a 2-word sentence before Thanksgiving. It will not be one you are expecting. November 21st. Margot was standing in her crib after a nap, looking at the corner of her room near the ceiling. She said, dark singing. She looked at me and smiled. It was her smile. It was her normal, untroubled, delighted smile. And I stood in the doorway and felt something shift in the architecture of my understanding, because those 2 words were not in her environment. Nobody had said dark singing to her. Nobody had read it in a book to her. It was not a phrase she could have parroted from daycare or television. She had composed it, or she had received it. And the difference between those 2 possibilities was everything. I brought it up to Suzanne that evening, obliquely. I asked whether it was normal for a kid Margot's age to produce novel, abstract phrases. Suzanne said some kids do that. She said it could be parroting. I asked her if dark singing sounded like parroting to her, and and she thought about it and said no. It sounded like Margot was describing something. I asked what she thought Margot might be describing. Suzanne said, probably something she heard at daycare, or something she dreamed. She said kids that age don't really distinguish between what they've experienced and what they've imagined. She meant this as a reassurance. It was the most frightening thing anyone said to me during the entire period. Because if Margot couldn't distinguish between things she experienced and things she imagined, and if something was speaking to her during sleep, then whatever it was saying would be woven into her cognitive foundation at the same level as everything else. It wouldn't be foreign material. It would be architecture. It would be load-bearing. And by the time she was old enough to examine her own thoughts, she would have no way to identify which parts came from her parents and which parts came from the static. Neither would I. I told Suzanne on November 1st, not the oblique version, the full version. I waited until Margot was in bed. I brought the notebook to the couch. I opened it. I said, I need to show you something, and I need you to read all of it before you respond. She read it. She asked me the questions a reasonable person asks. Was I sleeping enough? Was I under unusual stress? Had I heard the voice outside of the monitor? Yes, no, no. She asked if she could listen during the next nap. Sunday, both of us in the kitchen. Monitor on the counter between us. Margot asleep by 1. We sat there for an hour and 8 minutes. I heard nothing. Suzanne heard nothing. Margot woke up happy. Monday, I was alone. Margot went down at 12:40. At 1:05, the voice said, she heard everything you told Suzanne. Not the words, the transfer. She knows the information is moving now. I wrote it down. My hand was steady. That scared me more than trembling would have. Trembling would have meant the right part of me was still responding. What I felt instead was a focused, functional calm, like I was receiving operational information and my job was to log it. The voice had turned me into a clerk of my own daughter's alteration, and I was performing the role well, and the performance felt like competence, and I could not tell the difference between competence and capture. I did not tell Suzanne about that entry. The voice did not come when she was home. I tested this over 2 weeks, adjusting my schedule, sitting in the kitchen during naps on days she happened to be home early. Nothing. The moment I was alone with the monitor, it returned. 1 sentence, accurate, instructional, about Margot. The voice was selecting its audience. It was selecting me. And the criterion for selection was isolation, being the only adult in the house, which meant every time Suzanne left for work in the morning, I became eligible, and every time she came home, I became ineligible, and I could not determine whether the voice required my solitude or simply preferred it, and the difference between those two things mattered enormously, and I could not figure out why. By late November, Margot was speaking in ways that made other adults pause. Not alarmed, impressed. My mother-in-law visited for Thanksgiving and said, "She's really something, isn't she?" And the way she said it was the way you comment on a child who is clearly gifted. And I smiled and agreed, because what else do you do? Suzanne watched me from across the table. We had not yet agreed on what to do. We had not yet decided if the notebook was evidence of something real or evidence that I was losing my grip on ordinary life. She believed me. I'm certain of that. She believed I was hearing something. She was not certain that what I was hearing was what I thought it was. Then, December 4th, and the rules changed. 1:12 p.m. Margot's nap. The voice said, "You need to stop writing these down." I had the pen in my hand. I was reaching for the notebook. I stopped. Then it said, "She is starting to recognize the pattern of you writing after she sleeps. She does not yet connect it to what she hears. She will." 2 sentences. First time it had ever said more than one, and buried in the second sentence was the confirmation I had been circling for weeks. She hears, not she might hear, not she is near a sound source. She hears it. Margot hears the voice, and the voice knows she hears it, and the voice is now managing the information environment around her, telling me to stop keeping records because my daughter, who's not yet 2 years old, is beginning to detect a pattern in my behavior that will eventually lead her to connect the voice in her room with the notebook in the kitchen. And this connection is apparently something to be prevented. I closed the notebook. I put the pen down. I sat in the kitchen and I thought about what it means when the thing that is teaching your child tells you to stop documenting the lessons. I thought about what it means when an entity that has given you nothing but good outcomes asks you to stop keeping records. I thought about the fact that every cult, every abusive system, every closed institution eventually gets around to telling you not to write things down. And I thought about the fact that the voice might be right, that Margot might be approaching the age where she could detect the pattern, that my documentation might, in some way I couldn't model, interfere with whatever process was underway, that the voice was protecting her, not itself. And I could not tell which interpretation was correct, and there was no log I could pull and no diagnostic I could run. That night, I made the decision. Or rather, I made 2 decisions. There were really 1 decision split across 2 actions. I waited until Suzanne was asleep. I went downstairs and got the notebook from the kitchen drawer. I brought it upstairs and placed it on her nightstand, open to the first page. Then I went into Margot's room. I lifted the transmitter off the shelf. I turned it off. I put it in the closet on the top shelf, behind a stack of receiving blankets. I left the bedroom door open so I would hear her if she cried. The room was dark. The noise machine hummed. Margot slept on her back with her arm up. I stood there for a moment, and I said quietly to the room, "I don't know what you are." Nothing answered. The monitor was off. But I needed to have said it. I needed to exist for 1 moment as a person who spoke directly to the thing instead of being spoken to by it, even if the gesture was useless, even if the room was empty, even if I was talking to drywall and insulation and the faint smell of baby shampoo. I went to bed. I lay there in the dark and I waited, not for a sound, for morning. Because in the morning Suzanne would find the notebook and she would read it, and the part of this that I'd been carrying alone would become the part we carry together. And that was either the bravest thing I'd done or the most cowardly, depending on whether sharing the weight was an act of partnership or an act of offloading. Margot slept through the night. No cry at 3 a.m. No sound at all. In the morning, Suzanne woke up, and I was already awake watching her. She sat up. She saw the notebook. She looked at me. "Read it," I said. "Start from the beginning. I'll make coffee." She read it at the kitchen table. It took her about 20 minutes. I could see her face change at the entries she could cross-reference. The hinge, the 3 a.m. cry, the blocks, dark singing. She turned pages. She went back. She turned pages again. When she was done, she closed the notebook and put both hands flat on the table and sat still for a moment, and then said, "How long has the monitor been off?" "Since last night." "Where is it?" "Her closet." "Okay," she said, and she opened the notebook again and went through it a second time, slower. And I stood at the counter and watched her, and I understood that she was doing what I do. She was checking the log. She was verifying entries against her own memory of observable events. She was performing diagnostics, and I could see on her face the moments where the data matched. From upstairs, through the open doors, we heard Margot wake up. The small shifting sounds, the soft self-directed babbling that means she's awake but content, not calling for us yet. We both heard it. We both looked toward the stairs. Then Margot said, in a voice that carried clearly down the stairwell with a precision that no 22-month-old should possess, "It's okay. I can do both." A complete sentence. Subject, verb, object, adverbial context, delivered not as imitation, not as repetition, but as a statement addressed to two people she could not see but knew were listening, because we were always listening. That was what the monitor was for. That was what we had been doing. And now our daughter, in her crib, in the morning, with the monitor off and the notebook open on the table between us, was speaking to us in a sentence that answered a question we had not asked out loud. Suzanne looked at me. I looked at Suzanne. The notebook was open between us. Then Margot continued, babbling, the happy, exploratory vocalization of a toddler talking to herself. But woven through the babbling, between the English words I recognized, there were others. They were not nonsense syllables. They had phonemic structure. They had consistent stress patterns. They had the unmistakable cadence of language. Not a language I knew, but a language, and I recognized the cadence. I had heard it before, through the monitor, in the spaces between the sentences, in the static that I had always assumed was just static. Suzanne stood up. She said, "I'm going to go get her." "Okay," I said. She went upstairs. I heard her open the door. I heard Margot say "Mama" in exactly the voice she always used, bright and glad and entirely normal. I heard Suzanne pick her up. I heard the sounds of a mother and daughter beginning a morning. I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and 2 mugs of coffee, and I understood 3 things. The monitor was off. The voice was done talking to me. And my daughter was already something. Something beautiful and something strange. And something I was going to have to learn how to be a father to, without a manual, without instructions, without a single sentence telling me what to do next. For the first time in months, I was parenting without the voice, and the silence was more frightening than anything it had ever said. The transmitter is still in the closet. We haven't turned it on. We haven't thrown it out. It sits on the top shelf behind the receiving blankets, turned off, green light dark, and some nights I stand in the hallway outside Margot's room and I think about reaching up and taking it down and switching it on, just to see, just to check. And then I don't. Margot is 22 months old now. She speaks in full paragraphs. She knows the word for ceiling. She knows the word for hinge, for shadow, for frequency, for patience. She studies the world with a focus that does not match her age and a vocabulary that does not match any developmental chart her pediatrician has on file. Dr. Soren says she is exceptional. She uses that word like it's uncomplicated, exceptional. Suzanne and I talk about it when we can. Not every night. Some nights we eat dinner and watch something and let the notebook stay in the drawer. But on the nights we talk, we do not agree. Suzanne thinks the monitor should be destroyed. I think it should be kept. Suzanne thinks Margot should be evaluated by a specialist. I think a specialist will find a gifted child and nothing else. We disagree, and we are not pretending to agree. And I think that's the only thing we're doing right. Two parents facing the same impossible thing, unwilling to collapse the disagreement into false consensus. Last week, Margot said a word to Suzanne that Suzanne did not recognize. She could not find it in any language she searched. She wrote it down phonetically on a piece of paper and showed it to me. I looked at it. I recognized the cadence. I had heard it through the monitor, in the spaces between sentences, in the sound I used to think was static. I told Suzanne so. She nodded. She added it to a list she's keeping now, her own list in her own handwriting, separate from my notebook. We are both keeping records now. We have not compared them yet. I think we are afraid of what the comparison will show. I think we are afraid that the overlap will be too large to explain and the differences will be too specific to ignore. I think the comparison is coming soon. I think we both know it. Margot starts preschool in 4 months. She will walk into a room full of other children and she will speak in a voice that is already too precise and know things that no child her age should know, and see the world with an attention that her teachers will call gifted because that is the only word they have for it. And some afternoon, within the first few weeks, a teacher is going to call us. I am certain of this. The teacher is going to say, "Your daughter is remarkable." And then the teacher is going to pause, and in that pause will be the thing the teacher doesn't know how to say, which is that something about Margot is not just advanced, but different in a way that the word advanced does not cover. And when that call comes, Suzanne and I will be sitting in this kitchen, and we will answer it together, and we will not have a plan, and we will not have agreed, and we will not know what to say. But we will answer, because that is what you do. You do not keep your child home from the world because you are afraid of what the world will see in her. You pack her lunch, you label her jacket, you walk her to the door, you let go of her hand, and then you wait to see who she becomes, knowing that some of what built her came from you and some came from the static. And you will never be able to tell which parts are which, and you will love her completely and without reservation either way, because she is your daughter, and she is extraordinary, and she is yours, and she is not only yours. And that is the sentence you will spend the rest of your life learning how to say.